In this video, we expand the view mode tweaking and add some more shadows to the scene. Now, it's important to note that this course is focused on viewport capturing as opposed to rendering, which is what you might want for the highest quality shadows. I mention this now because the shadow feature can look pretty rough at times. Let's start off by practicing importing a view mode we created earlier. I'm going to go to Tools, Options, and down in the Display modes, we get this basic listing. And here's where we can import anything that we've created. By clicking on the Import button is where we can gain access to any previously created display mode. Click on that. There is the Chapter 1. There's the Pen Plus I created, and I'm just going to say Open. It now gets added to this list, and we can start modifying some of the settings. Now that we've got it loaded, let's hit OK and then select it. We're going to go over to here. There is the Pen Plus we just brought in. It takes a few seconds to generate. And I'm going to start accessing the shadows under Display, Shadows On. So by default, or at the very beginning, it will look pretty bad. Let's start editing some of the detailed settings here with the little click button. I'm going to come down here to the shadows, and we get this whole section with lots and lots of options. I'm going to tweak some of the settings here, and in general, I want to make sharp, crisp shadows because typically there's just not enough memory or video card horsepower to get anything close to smooth-looking shadows. So it's a bit of a trade-off. So I'm going to go over here, maximize. So that's sharpening them up. I don't want soft edges. Again, we want to make those crisp. So no blurring. Let's bring the artifacts to as clean as possible. Transparent objects won't cast shadows. That'll just speed things up a little bit. And then we get to the shadow color. By the way, you can see that they actually got quite a bit sharper and cleaner. But let's modify the color here. This typically pure black does not look good, so I'm going to bring it up to where I typically go for most of my shading is about 50% gray. We don't get to preview that, so we do have to say OK. And then it will be updated in the scene. So as we move around, we can get kind of a feel for how those shadows will look. I'll just leave them as is for now. Once you get these shadow settings, it's a simple manner to just turn them off and to get them back on. It should remember all of your settings from the previous adjustments. I'll go ahead and hit OK just so we can navigate around. What I want to call your attention to now is the angle of those shadows. So notice when I rotate the scene, the shadows are always moving away from the viewer. So that's by virtue of the default lighting setup. So Rhino uses what's called default lights so that there's always some illumination in the scene. And that just means that they're going from the same direction no matter where you move. So since you're working on architecture, wouldn't it be nice to get some accurate sun locations? So here's where we analyze that. We're going to go up to Panels and then select Sun. So the sun is currently off, so let's turn that on. Now nothing will change. That's because we're still using the default lighting. We have to go back to the Pen Plus and make one more change there. I'm going to edit the Pen Plus. Here's the default scene lighting. The default is those imaginary lights in the scene, which continue to move around no matter where you look. But by using scene lighting, it uses any specific lights that have been placed, like the sun. We'll just make that one change. Again, if you have any problems, you may want to try tweaking the advanced GPU to see if that helps or not. I'm going to hit OK. Now we do get some weirdness. The shadow, in fact, shows nothing inside of it. So that's why I left this panel open. We're going to have to turn the skylight on. So the skylight will have some additional illumination coming from around of a dome into and around, filling in some of those shadows. You'll notice you get a little bit of grain in some of the intersection areas. So it's a bit of a trade-off. If you like that, great. If not, you may just want to stay away from the sun in general. But let's talk about this angle now. This is really cool. With the manual control on, we can change the direction of the sun. So there's coming from the north. Let's have it come from the southwest. And we can go low to the horizon. After a certain point, it's nighttime. So we'll go up into the sky. And you can just kind of dial it around. The cool thing, though, is if I move around the scene, the shadow doesn't move like it did with the default setting. So this is very specific scene-based sun lighting. Now we're on manual control. If you want more control here and have it adjust to your actual latitude and longitude, you turn off manual control and there'll be extra space down here available. And you can even pick the year, the date, and the location on the globe. So you pretty much just click anywhere you want, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of options there. So you notice as I move different times of the day, different times of the year, and different parts of the globe. And you actually notice there is a map here with a lot of different cities. So you can just scroll through there. A lot of stuff to choose from. So help yourself and go crazy. Go ahead and close this for now. Just kind of leave it where it was. So let's go ahead and line this up and talk about how to capture our views. We've been making lots of changes, but we hadn't done any viewport capturing. So kind of align this into a nice looking low angle typically. You also might want to adjust your camera lens. I usually go from anywhere between 20 and 30 millimeters for architectural scenes. It's kind of nice to have a slight perspective exaggeration. So to capture the scene, the best way to do it, or the easiest, is to just access the viewport label, hit capture, and then select to a file. We'll go also into the chapter 1 and just save it right there. Now there's some other settings. We can even do a lot of really cool tricks. We'll cover those later. For now, you can just do a test save. I'll call this one Capture 02. Save it. We'll be covering a lot more of these options in the Screen Capture Strategies video coming up next. So if the shadow effects are not to your liking, then definitely just leave them off. Our focus is on making very graphical and stylized illustrations for our presentation.